appreciate it. We're here to take up the confirmation hearing on Nancy Collins. And in the package you received, you've got the peer reports and everything. If I could just remind you to return those to Christy before you leave the meeting room. Form, it looks like. So is Ms. Collins here? Ms. Collins, if you come up to the podium and introduce yourself, state why you think you're qualified to serve on this board and the State Board of Education, and then mindful we convene at 10 o'clock this morning, so if you could keep your comments to about 10 minutes or so, or I'd be grateful.
Certainly. Well, it's a privilege to be here. Let me get this adjusted. I've got a new pen sticker, and I was a little surprised that I have to wear it. Forgot my mask, but I've got now one. We're living in unprecedented times. I know that he wants me to talk a little bit about my qualifications, and I know that you may have some of the educational qualifications down, but in my own life, and it's been reinforced over and over that the real qualifications are what you get from being in positions. It's not always just being a member of this or that, but it's what you learn, what your life experience is. And in this time, especially in education, I think we have got great opportunities. But my response to the opportunities in hard times is, again, what you're going to get out of them. And so that's how I'd like to preface my, what you would call qualifications. After high school, at Tupelo High School, after graduation, I went to the W and got a degree in speech therapy and worked in a public school in the Louisiana Delta. And I know the feeling of being unable to help every student. I had some students I did pretty well with, and I guess it was just the learning curve of the first year of teaching in a public school. But there were so many differences, and there were so many adjustments that I had to make, and I was often discouraged. And I've always tried to remain in that teaching profession in a way, even though I left it after about 3 or 4 years. But, and I've taught with teenagers, I've taught in public schools, abstinence classes, I've taught summer camps with junior auxiliary, I've taught different things for different people, but I've always been teaching, whether it was in nursing, teaching nurses to do obstetric sonography, and that's a little bit of obstetric sonography, not that I'm a master at that. But all of my life, teaching has been a part of it and remains to this day. In fact, one of the things that I need to tell you, Mr. Chairman, is that I've started teaching a class or 2 a week, but it is in aerobics. So I don't think it's going to be something that's going to influence much about the background check, but I did need to let you know that. But anyway, what I realized, though, in teaching is you have to relate to the unique individual. You have to give each child hope. And that was a lesson that I carried away that, to me, is one of the greatest qualities about being a good teacher. I worked then in the Louisiana Delta as a social worker. And that's when I learned about disparity. And I learned that even though there are opportunities for all, there are great differences. It was hard for me. It was also a rude awakening. I was in my early 20s. But what I saw there was show that I loved and I cared, and give a helping hand up. Try to listen to them and understand. Later on, and this is not, I wouldn't say a qualification, but it is probably where I learned perseverance and persistence. I was a single mom with 2 babies under 2. I had the hard task of learning that I was going to have to support them, that I was going to have to change the way that I had done things. I was going to have to move to get the support of my parents. And I remember trying to go and get a car, and I wasn't able to get a car because I didn't have a job and I didn't have the things that I needed to have. So I realized in that time that I was going to have to prepare for the unknown. I was going to have to prepare for the future for my 2 babies. And that's when I went to nursing school. I learned elementary budgeting. I learned about saving for the future. Then, but at that time I also came to know my Savior and had great hope there. But still, it was a very, very hard time in my life. But the lessons that I learned would go with me forever, because there's always differences in people and there's always things that you can learn from each other. And you never know what the background is from somebody. But yes, I'm qualified. I'm qualified to know that not everybody's alike, not everybody needs what the other person needs. And in education, we've got great opportunities, and there is a lot of disparity in our districts. But after I became a nurse, I began to learn about warning signs with diseases, about learning how to help somebody stay well, and to look for that, and to listen, and to observe. And one of the things that happened to me later in my nursing career, after I had 2 other children, was something that probably has impacted my life more than anything else. And that was, I found I was a part-time nurse at that time, and I was taking the place of a regular nurse with her patients that day. We were out in the field. This was outpatient hospice care. And outpatient hospice care is always, the hospice patient is always supposed to have an able caregiver there, or they cannot go on hospice care. So as I was trying to find her house, it was about 12 miles from my home. It was a hot, humid day, 100 degrees. I came across an isolated, abandoned-looking trailer without a door, farm animals in the yard, and I walked inside, and there was no air conditioning. You could tell it was in a place of disrepair, and there was a little precious black woman, emaciated and lying in her own waste in a little cot. She had no caregiver. She had not had a caregiver, and she was actively dying. She couldn't reach her medicine. She couldn't reach water. And I did what I could for her. I called to see if we could get an ambulance out there. There was no one that had a place for her. She was poor, didn't have money to pay. She died shortly thereafter. But it taught me something. It taught me something deep, and I couldn't get it out of my mind. And then about 2 months later, I went on a mission trip to Mexico City, and there in Mexico City, there was a hospice home. And it was serving the poorest of the poor in Mexico City. And do you know, even though it was filled with AIDS patients, paraplegics, all diseases, they each had a casket under their bed. They were full of joy, peace, and they were well taken care of. And I thought, if they can do it here, in a land that has so few opportunities, we can do this in North Mississippi. And by the grace of God, with the vision of Sanctuary Hospice House was birthed. It took a whole community. It took really all of North Mississippi, and it took an act of Congress to establish Sanctuary as a national demonstration project for hospice care in rural America. And this was the first of its kind. Now today, 15 years later, it's a 24-bed hospice facility, inpatient. and it served thousands of people, but it's regardless of their ability to pay, all patients, regardless of their ability to pay. And I thought to myself, in that struggle, what did I learn from that? And this is what I learned. If you are doing what is right, if you're following the call that God's given to you to take care of somebody else, to help somebody else, if you see injustice in any way, you try to do what you can. But every leader in that area, most of them, and I was surrounded by so many people, much wiser than I, volunteers from all over. But the leadership in most of the places said it could not be done. In fact, I remember one meeting of a board, and they laughed. And they said, this is no way you can do it. You have to go to Washington. Well, we did. But we didn't know what we were doing. You know me. I didn't know much about the workings of the Senate when I came here. But this is what happened, and this is the product of it. And I still think anytime there is an unprecedented time, anytime there's hardship, there is an opportunity for us to learn. What I learned there was persistence. What I learned there was doing a bigger budget, building a $3.5 million facility that's been added on to without debt, without hiring somebody else to do your work, and with hitting the pavement and doing what we knew we were supposed to do. All of that to say, I received for Sanctuary a few years later the National Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis Award for Public Service at the Jefferson Award ceremonies in Washington. I received it for the whole team because we had to work together. We had to stand together. We had to believe in each other. And we had to believe in something that was greater than ourselves. I think I bring with that qualification with me. The other thing that I'd like to say is we had to think outside the box. What we had done, what we were trying to do, had not been done before. So we were the first of its kind. We wanted to be an example to others. And thinking outside the box means you...
Senator Collins, could you wrap it up? I know there's probably 7 members that want some questioning.
Sure. Oh, yes, sir.
Few
Yes,
more
sir.
words,
I
please.
will. I apologize. And then I went to a pregnancy care center, and I learned about the vulnerable women, and I learned about helping them, and I learned to be a voice for the voiceless. All of that to say, the way that I established what my principles were was not asking what was safe and what was not asking what was maybe the most popular thing, but to do what is right. That's what I bring to you. I appreciate your time, and I apologize for going on. You know, hospice is very close to my heart, so I wanted to share that with you, and I thank you for giving me this time.
Anybody have any questions for Senator Collins? Come on now, I know you guys do. Ms. Collins, you served in the Senate for several years, is that correct?
5 years. 5 years.
So you know how this procedure works and so forth. So I appreciate you coming down here and wanting to submit yourself to it. What would you say your proudest moment, I guess, of serving in the Senate would have been?
I apologize, I cannot hear you, and I'm so sorry.
What would you say the most, the proudest moment you had, the best legislation you had when you were serving in the Senate?
Oh, I don't know that, but anytime I could affect children, anytime I could affect vulnerable children, I think that was the hallmark for me, whether it was about dyslexia, whether it was about anything about education, but also I think seeing the process, seeing us work together, sometimes working closer than others, but seeing us work together, it's very unique.
Well, let me ask you, you're nominated to serve on the State Board of Education. What do you see your role as a board member to be, and where do you want to take education if you were confirmed to this?
Well, that was part of my talk. What I want to do is offer and be able to see and be able to think outside the box for all of our children. One of the goals,
What does that mean?
okay, all of the goals that we have in the State Board of Education talks about all children and every child. And I think that's what we need to be focused on because every child is unique. I do think that this time has revealed to us opportunities that we have that we may not have seen before with distance learning. I think that that's a challenge, but I also think that's a huge opportunity for us. And I think that we can go, I think the sky's the limit because this is our greatest resource, the children.
Member, have any questions? Anything at all? Any motion then at this time? Senator Bryan?
Mr. Chairman, I move to table the nomination.
Motion to table would, what essentially, Senator Bryan?
Excuse me?
The motion to table, you want a motion to table the nomination? Is that what your motion is?
Yes.
I believe that is a precedence motion, isn't that correct?
Excuse me,
Bill?
you didn't recognize me. I spoke before Senator Bryan to do advise and consent.
I recognize Senator Bryan. The motion is a motion to table. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed?
No.
The ayes have it. The ayes have it. Rise and report. Ed?